Perfecto, sigo hablando un poco entonces.
Perdón, eh, a dar la bienvenida junto con...
Welcome to the launching of the Traceability Report for Timber, a management tool for the government's case studies for Latin America. It is a pleasure to be here with you and to welcome everybody to this launching of the report. This event is being broadcasted by the FAO's YouTube channel with simultaneous interpretation for English and Spanish. For those who may want to, you can ask any questions through the platform of YouTube. This is going to be recorded and is going to be available in the FAO's channel in YouTube, so you can listen to it later on. We would like to welcome the governments of Europe who are funding this program for the EU. We would also like to thank the Climate and Forest Initiative from Norway and the Lee Foundation. Of course, we will also like to thank the governments of Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Guatemala, Peru for all their support in the information that they have provided in order for us to conduct this work and the revisions of each one of the texts. Thank you as well to Daphne Hibney and also to Brune Kamnet, leaders of the FAO-EU program, FLEGT, at a global level. Also to the FAO teams and WRI for making the publishing process possible of these documents. I will now hand over to one of our moderators, Mr. Guillermo Navarro, who is a forestry economy in Costa Rica. He has been developed as a forestry official in the region, and he is also responsible for the coordination of the FAO and EU program in Latin America and the Caribbean. Dr. Navarro also conducted in the Center of Forestry Institute, where he was a director of the Latin American course for policy and forestry politics. He has also worked as a coordinator in the governance unit for forestry and economics at the office, in the regional office for Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the International Union for the Preservation of Nature, UCN. He was also taking office as a dean for academic matters at the University of Ant. He also had the degree of Doctor in Economy and Forestry Management at the Freiburg University in Germany, and he has a Wildlife Mastery by the Technical University of 3D in Germany, and he also holds a degree of pre-grade degree in forestry engineer with emphasis in management of biodiversity from Idaho, US. Additionally, Mr. Navarro has also a lot of experience in wildlife, in tropical management, in the formulation and elaboration of development projects, as well as research and investment related to forestry economies, analysis of investment of natural resources associated to network and restoration of forestry landscapes, business models, focus on the chain level, and also conducted studies on how to transform into green economies in the energy sector, in the use of land and use of the biodiversity. Dr. Guillermo Navarro, please be welcome to the session. You have the floor. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your nice presentation. Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon to some of you. It is a true pleasure to be able to moderate this panel for the launching of this report for timber traceability and management tool for government's case studies for Latin America. It is a pleasure for me to salute my colleagues from WRI and also from the Senior Assessor Agur Lebregon, the main researcher for forestries, and also Tobias Estorne, who is an advisor. Also, I would like to thank three of our panelists, Scarlett Batista from the Institute of Forestry Conservation from Honduras, Luis Ineid from the Institute of Forests in Guatemala, and Edgar Mora from the Ministry of MII, Environment Ministry of Colombia.
En esta actividad y sobre todo a
And especially want to thank all the people who are present right now and assisting this webinar, who are joining us from the different countries of Latin America. As you know, there is a growing demand for countries, developing countries, to have traceability systems for timber. We have been able to identify at least 5 reasons to develop a traceability system. Of course, the first one and the most evident one is the need to track legal wood until it reaches the consumer. And the idea is for this traceability system to be able to maintain the supply chains of timber products and also be able to track legal wood from its origin and illegal wood. The traceability systems have been creating databases, and this allows for them to also be elements of information management in order to support statistics and in order to create better policies for forests. We can also use them in forest monitoring, which allows us to cross-check and create balances. Another of the purposes for these systems is to improve accountability and have more transparency for fiscal income, and in countries where they are buying wood in the timber trade, it allows us, for those countries with new policies, to be able to support due diligence when importing the wood. And we can also include some producing countries which are in the process of voluntary agreements with the European Union, which also include this aspect of due diligence. Many countries have made really great efforts to develop these national systems with different approaches and different tools to do it. In this panel, we will review how these governments in Latin America have been proactive in the development of traceability systems. And before continuing, we will be having a presentation on this publication and a panel where we will have some questions with 3 panelists who belong to the countries of 3 Latin American countries. And then we will open the floor for questions from the audience. I would like to have Tibart now talk to give us some welcoming words, and then we will go back to the presentation of the introduction for the traceability system. So go ahead, Chip, it's your turn now.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Guillermo. Hi, I'm Chip Barber with the World Resources Institute. I'm the Director for Natural Resources Policy and Governance. And I'm really pleased to be helping launch this important new publication on timber traceability, a management tool for governments with case studies from Latin America. My congratulations go to the authors for this important work. I know it was hard work and that its progress was quite disrupted by the pandemic. So I'm really pleased that it's finally completed. It's been an honor for some time for WRI to cooperate with FAO in carrying out this work. Our 2 organizations have a long history of cooperation on forest and land use issues. We're pleased that this cooperation is continuing, not only through this publication, but also through our recently launched cooperative effort, the Forest Data Partnership. The demand for accountability and transparency in the exploitation and trade in tropical timber is growing, both within countries in Latin America and in their major overseas markets. Credible, accurate, and cost-effective timber traceability systems are really a fundamental building block for achieving these goals. Now, this report provides important information about timber traceability systems that are led by governments in the Latin American region. It details the experiences of seven countries in the development and implementation of traceability systems, and is really incredibly timely as we see the interest in accountability, traceability, transparency in the trade in not only tropical timber, but in other products, agricultural commodities and such. It's noticeable that many Latin American countries have taken the initiative to develop these systems. While the context and the motivation, as you'll see, are a bit different among the 7 countries profiled in this report, they together give valuable lessons that they've learned from their experiences. And those should really be useful across all countries and regions that are dealing with the same issues of timber legality and sustainability. So with that, I will turn it back to you, to the chair, to keep going. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chep. Bueno, para iniciar el panel, como ustedes saben, este informe
So to begin with the panel, as you know, this report, the aim is to try to report on the best practices of traceability of timber in Latin America. And the idea is to have a reference for the other countries which have the task of implementing and developing these systems. Now I would like to have Tobias speak, a consultant from the WRI,
para que nos presente,
in order to present and give us an introduction on this report. So go ahead, Ruth and Tobias. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much, Guillermo. I'll just hand it over to Ruth because she's going to start with the first slides. Thank you.
Buenos días, buenas tardes, muchas gracias, Guillermo.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Ruth Nogueron. I'm going to give you a brief introduction, a brief summary of the report that we are launching this morning. We know that several governments around the world are developing and implementing traceability systems. And as Guillermo said, it's very important to document the best practices. Guillermo already talked a bit about the benefits of traceability. They are good to help the forestry system, but also for the private sector, these systems can really help improve the management of operations and also help with competition. So the objectives are to document lessons and best practices that are being implemented in 7 countries of Latin America by the end of 2020. And also another of the objectives is to help recognize that timber traceability is a global trend and is becoming a common requirement. So Tobias, go ahead.
Thank you, Ruth. So on this slide, we see, we can already see from the geographic coverage that traceability systems are indeed already quite important and common in the Latin American region. Even if we don't see all of Mexico here, we are talking already about probably in the range of 50% of the total area of the region. And on the list, we see an overview of all the systems we have been working on for this report, starting with Brazil, where we have even several systems operating in parallel on national and partly on state level, and then even for certain types of forests, federal concessions with extra systems for them. Whereas for the other countries, we have basically mostly one central system that works on national level. Next slide, please. So in this, this is a generic illustration of the kind of system we have been working on for this report. And what they all have in common is basically that they collect information along the supply chain, starting even with title allocation and with permit approval. Then, of course, the harvest, the roundwood transport, primary processing, typically in the sawmill, could also be a plywood mill. Further transport, secondary processing until exportation or domestic consumption, sales to the consumer. Not all systems in the report cover the full scope as it is illustrated here. This is more or less the most comprehensive solution, but the basic approach is the same for all of them. What they all have in common, what was already mentioned by Guillermo, is a central database as the backbone of the system. So all the information that is collected along the supply chain is reported to one database, and that enables the owners and the users of this traceability system to reconcile the data across several steps in the supply chain, and that is what eventually enables different levels of traceability. And as an additional element, we will find for each system a layer of monitoring and verification activities that can include different methodologies depending on the step in the supply chain. The forest management plan could be verified via a field visit. It could also be a desk review, or the use of remote sensing, or a mix of all those three approaches to verify a forest management plan. The same goes basically for harvest. During transport, we can use GPS tracking devices. There are of course, road checks. And during processing, the mills can be audited this way. It is a very important element of those systems, and the different governments and owners of the systems have different approaches on applying this monitoring and verification activities, as you can see from the single case studies. Next slide, please. So on the next tables, there is basically it's like a comparison. We don't have the time to go through all of them in detail, but I want to highlight some differences from the different systems in the different countries that can also be a basis for the further discussion. So the level of detail that is collected along the supply chain in the different systems varies, and there are systems that collect very detailed information, for example, as in Brazil, where the full forest management plan is imported into the system, and the system knows the location, the species, and the volume of every single tree from the beginning. And these systems then try to carry this level of detail through the supply chain as far as possible. The farthest it gets is usually primary processing, where the sawmill also reports the sawing of single log numbers, and they can still record for a batch of sawn wood, for example, which logs went to in this batch of sawwood. So this enables you from a board to have an idea from which forests and from which actual trees these boards came. And then there are other systems that are more based on volume tracking, and they will capture information on species and on volumes and on forest origin, but they will not assign individual numbers to every tree and to every saw log. And in comparing the 7 systems, we will find different levels of detail that are achieved in the different systems. Yeah, next slide, please. You can also see that there are different levels of implementation. So Brazil and Guatemala are all operating systems for a longer time already. Also in Ecuador, the system has been existing for a longer time, but they have been repeatedly updated. Next slide, please. Yeah. And some of them are still in development, and even the traceability protocols, the information that has to be captured in different steps of the supply chain is even yet to define. Thank you very much, and I give it back to Ruth.
Thank you, Tobias. And so all this information was compiled, and then we analyzed it in an analytical framework to help us compare and contrast. This analytical framework included phases, planification, design and implementation, and uptake. Perdón, voy a cambiar al español. Y dentro de
I'm going to switch. So within the planning, we divided this into initial considerations, the scope, geographical, legal scope, the scope within the value chain, and also the planning for its implementation in the field. So just to finish, I'm going to talk about the main points, the findings, the recommendations, the conclusions of these comparisons. Since we don't have a standard format to develop these kinds of traceability systems, as my colleague Tobias said, these systems are being implemented in different phases. And since a traceability system to be implemented is quite complex, so it is useful for us to compare what is being done in order to navigate and see what are the concerns of users among the different systems. Planning is crucial. We have to determine the objective and what is going to be the benefit of these systems for users. We also need to have a direct communication with users in a standardized way. This is very important to make sure that they can support the system and also the use of a system, and also to ensure that they have the capability to comply with the requirements of the system. Another important point is that it is important to think about a long-term funding strategy for the system. As Tobias said, the verification in the field is key, and there are also technological tools that are useful, but it is difficult to implement all of them. So they need to be adapted, and they have to be the suitable ones within the context in which they're going to be implemented, so we can make sure that they're going to be used in the long term. We also saw in some of the examples in Brazil, within the social information also is important for us to develop the responsibility and traceability systems. This is a way for us to promote products as well, and a proper and a legal consumption of products that are traceable. Also, most of the organizations in charge of the design and the planning of the systems, in general, they have a low budget compared to other governmental agencies. So this is very important to count with the political support, with technical support, so they can receive this technical support from both the private and the public sector and the stakeholders from both sides. So I just wanted to conclude, just to thank you, and I do also mention our funders and all our colleagues from the WRI, from the FAO as well. And everybody, please, I would like to thank everybody in the fields from Brazil, Colombia, Guatemala, and Peru, and Costa Rica who supported this project. Thank you all.
Gracias, Ruth. Gracias, Tobias, por esta
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Tobias, for this presentation. It is also important to mention and to annotate, to make notes about how complex this effort is, right? It is not an easy task. This is not a copy and paste from country to country. We have to really think about all the different dimensions involved of what one needs to do in order for the traceability system can be adjusted and can be tailored to the needs of another country. So another country can comply with the requirements of their law, and they can also cooperate in a systematic way. It is not easy at all. As our dear colleague Rubén Darío Moreno said, he said that the traceability system, it is not traceability in documents. We also need to be constructing a traceability system, a network for it to work also in cooperation with forestry authorities, which have to do with auditing, control, with things that have to do with access to civil society, for forestry activities, and also for the indigenous communities. And of course, this traceability system needs to be adapted and adjusted to all these ends and all these users as well. So it is important to keep this in mind, because this traceability system is a way to have a feedback and a continuous source of information to our database. And also we need to preserve this database towards the future, because this database is going to make our institutions more credible and is going to provide trust. So this is a very interesting topic in which we're working. Now I would like to talk about another part of this activity that has to do with the panel.
Panelistas y vamos a hacer
We will have 3 panelists and we will be making 3 questions, asking 3 questions, and we will allow some time for the 3 of them to answer these questions. So it is a pleasure for me to present Luis Ine. Luis is the head of technology of the unit of the National Forest Institute of the Government of Guatemala. He is responsible for the institutional coordination for the automation of processes with the objective of decentralizing forest management services through technological improvements. Luis has also a degree in computer science and a PhD in information systems. We also have with us Edgar Mora, Forestry Engineering, Master in Environmental Energy Management, with more than 12 years of professional experience. Edgar is currently at the Directorate of Forest, Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services of the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development of Colombia, where he supports forest governance issues and serves as a focal point of the National Forest Traceability System and the Community Forestry Program. We will also have Scarlett Bautista, who works at the Forest Conservation Institute, ICF, in Honduras, and works as a forestry technician. Scarlett is the coordinator of the Forestry Statistic Unit, which manages the CIRMA platform, which is a computer system for timber traceability in Honduras. So thank you, Scarlett, Edgar, and Luis for being here today. And I would like to then ask the first question and give you then the floor. The traceability systems were already presented and highlighted in the system, but I would like to know from your point of view, which have been the most important achievements when it comes to the design and implementation of traceability in each one of your countries. So Scarlett, you have the floor, and then we will continue with Edgar and Luis. Scarlett?
Buenos días, buenas tardes.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to be here today, to be part of this panel. In order to answer your question, as you mentioned, in Honduras, we have the CIRMA platform. That is the computer system for timber traceability. The traceability is synonymous of, this has made a lot of accomplishments for us. First of one is the follow-up of the timber use. Thanks to this platform, we were able to conduct a control, so we can know what is the point of origin, and we are able to trace this until it is exported. So we have a complete control of the whole process. This has been one of the most important things for us here in Honduras. So we were able to document all this process from the harvest point to the exportation or the final use. Now technicians in Honduras are also saving time because they're able to access the platform, upload the information. In the past, they would have to resource to notebooks, as we call them here, physical mediums, or we would have to keep an Excel sheet. But now they have direct access to the platform. They load their information, and then that information is downloadable. So another achievement, important achievement, has to do with the data. Data have better and higher quality now, because if you made a mistake when you upload information, you can maybe enter a management plan, and maybe you're making a mistake when you're indicating data about volume extraction, because there are limits, of course, limits of extraction according to the management plan. But if you made a mistake and you enter some data that is not correct, then you will receive an alert from the platform that will say, please verify this according to the documents. So this is another good protocol that we have within the platform.
Muchísimas gracias, Scarlett.
Thank you so much, Scarlett. Edgar, you have now the floor, please. I will repeat which were the most important achievements when it comes to the design and the implementation for this traceability system in Colombia. Yes, thank you, Guillermo. The most important achievements we can highlight have to do with the modernization of the forestry sector. Because as you know, the traceability system for forestry is being transformed from an analog system. As my colleague from Honduras said, many of the tools that we were using in the past were done through paper or files or Excel databases. So since we are now using digital tools which standardize processes, this, of course, means the modernization of this sector. And as a consequence, this enables for us to integrate and conduct surveillance and control activities on the forestry products that are handled and traded in the country. Another achievement for these traceability systems is that these systems have commitments towards the legal policies, not only at the country, but also in the region, so we can ensure the legality of our products in Colombia. So since we are implementing the traceability system and its digital modules, this is a way for us to ensure that we are complying with our commitments towards the legality of forestry products. And regarding legality, through the implementation of traceability system, we can close these legality gaps. So as we close these gaps, even though the system will not be able to, of course, get rid of all the lack of legality, it is enabling us to close these gaps. And it is generating satisfaction. It is ensuring that we are able to work more in detail with the standardization of units of measures and products. So these are the achievements that I would like to highlight regarding this traceability system in Colombia, in which we are still working, we're still making progress in this digitalization process for all its modules.
Muchísimas gracias, Edgar.
Thank you so much, Edgar. You were very concise. Now we would like to hear our colleague Luis. Luis, you have the floor. Which were the achievements in the planning of the traceability system in the case of Guatemala? Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. Yes, as an institution, we face a lot of challenges, but many of the achievements are similar to the ones that my previous colleague said. First of all, the standardization of processes. We have 35 offices at a national level, but we had a lot of discretionality in the way in which things were handled among these offices. So these discrepancies in the way that we will receive documents, we will register companies, all these kinds of situations were a challenge for us. But now this has been standardized. Also for the traceability, since the traceability system was implemented with the control for trading activities for forestry products, everything that gets into and is exported into the system, one of the main achievements is the recognition of a single valid transportation system at a national level. Because in the past, companies, they were the ones producing their own documents for transportation, which generated a duplication of work, doubling documents, alterations of documents or forging. But now we have a legal certainty because this is being recognized by the competent and relevant institutions from the ministry, the police forces, and the judicial forces and authorities. They take a single kind of unit of document as a certain document and legal document. So all companies in the forestry sector must be inside this IT system. So since we have this IT system, it is mandatory for them to use it. It was already approved by our board of directors, where we have stakeholders from the government, the academia, the private sector. And of course, since this turned into a mandatory thing, we don't have the situation of receiving comments from technicians where we see a lack of resources as human resources, because in the past we've had some discrepancies. But now the user must comply with this kind of documents, which of course have to comply with this IT platform.
So it's much more efficient to have fiscalization than doing it randomly. Another of the things is that nowadays we have quite a bit of information. Before, as a forest institution, we are in charge of the forestry part outside of protected areas. And many times we needed to have information that the universities have to provide for us because they had more capability for having that data internationally. But now we provide it for universities because we have the information on who is importing, what's the internal trade, what's exported. We have so much information now that we were able to make that connection of forest, industry, and market. And so now we have tools, and there are new platforms that have been generated where we create that link. So everybody can know now whom to provide the product to, that product they have in the fields. The same way someone who is trading can know which producers can provide that product with the different species. Now we are also expanding on these platforms to have forest electronic commerce, e-commerce, and we've been doing it for some years, and we have what we call the forest market. So with a forest market, we're doing some sort of forest Amazon internally, and we want to spread it in a much wider manner to an international level. This is what takes us to have this control, and we also have the part of fiscalization, as I mentioned. These are very interesting things. As Dr. Navarro said, this is something that we have a lot to talk about on, but we are still growing. Thank you. Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Edgar and Scarlett. These activities definitely, they even give me goosebumps, because when I talked about the 5 goals of the traceability systems, just with this question, you've opened my eyes, and I can write down now more than 8 goals for the traceability systems in our countries. When Luis was speaking, and when I was hearing Luis, Scarlett, and Edgar, we already start to see several similar aspects of the countries of the region with information generation, traceability information, the institutional backup that we have. So that's very interesting, all the different applications, the growth that the countries are having in parallel. And I want to congratulate you for the efforts that you're doing in each of your governments. I would like to move on to the next question, if that's okay with you. The question would be, from your perspective, and considering that it's a process, which could be very specifically the 3 main challenges or the biggest challenges that you've faced in this design and implementation of traceability systems in your countries? Maybe we can change the order. Let's have Edgar first, then Scarlett, and Luis is going to be the first one in the next question. So go ahead, Edgar. Thank you very much, Guillermo. The 3 biggest challenges in design and implementation of traceability systems for Colombia would be in the design aspect. A great challenge was to be able to articulate the technical language of forestry with the technical language of the development of an information system to take it to its digital versions, the digital versions of these traceability systems. That was a really great challenge. when beginning with the design and during the development of these digital modules of the traceability systems in Colombia. We have the governance structure in the country that is related with forestry administration in Colombia. We have 41 environmental authorities that are regional, autonomous, and it's a great challenge to be able to standardize, structure, and agree as authorities in charge of the control and surveillance, and to be a warranty for the forestry products in the country. This was also a big challenge that we've been able to overcome by articulating the work. And we have a common aim, which is the legality of the products of forestry, and that allows us to have that articulation and to be able to develop and implement the traceability systems. And another one that gathers a bit of the two other ones is the resistance in the implementation with the digital versions of the traceability systems. There is some resistance from different stakeholders, the same stakeholders that carry out control and surveillance of the terrain, and the main stakeholders, the main users of a module, such as, for example, the book of forestry operations, which is what the companies or the forestry industry uses, the ones who carry out the processing of the different products. So these are challenges that are really challenging, and they become opportunities for us to continue with the development of the forestry traceability systems. Those three are the ones that are on my radar. Thank you.
Y creo que el más particular
Yes, and I
es
think
el
that
tema
the most particular one is the one of
cómo mapear en un sistema
engineering, how to map in a
descentralización,
system this challenge of decentralization in all of these autonomous
sistema
corporations, and how the system can integrate them in the
del
administration
forestal,
of
sobre
the
todo cuando
forestry resource,
de madera que van
especially when we have timber flows
¿verdad? No
that
solo hacia afuera,
travel between the
sino
different
hay-
departments of the country, not just outside.
departamentos
There
productores,
are
departamentos, por decirlo así, de
producing departments and
Entonces,
departments that need
desafíos,
timber.
¿verdad?
So there is a challenge in how to integrate a
con estas
system
administraciones
with
descentralizadas.
these
Muy, muy
decentralized administrations. So this is very interesting.
Bueno, le doy la palabra ahora a
We will
a
now
Scar-
have Scarlett
para ver los desafíos de Honduras.
to talk about the challenges of Honduras. So in Honduras, in a different way from the other countries, there is still a need to standardize the platform, a platform that tracks all the information regarding the use of wood. The CDF, as an organization of the government, has two parts nationally, and we still need to find a way to access the most remote areas where we can take the technicians and to get the information into the platform. I think that this is one of the great challenges that we have. Another challenge could be the training of the technicians, because depending on the change of administration or different things in the country, there is a change of the technicians that have already been trained to use the platform. So then we need to hire new technicians and train them, and that means, of course, time and budget to be able to continue with the platform. And the other thing would be to strengthen the information technology system of these platforms, because it's not uncommon that the platforms have issues, they don't work, So it's important to strengthen this system so that they're always working and that there is no issue when adding the information to the
Sí,
platform.
definitivamente son
Yes,
tres
those are
temas.
definitely three topics that are challenges in our countries: how to maintain the system running, how to have trained people, and how to reach all the different points of the country, especially when the forests are in remote areas with less services.
Desafíos bastante
So those
pragmáticos de
are really practical challenges
superarlos y requieren de mucho
in order
presupuesto
to
también.
overcome, and they require a lot of budget as well. That's my intuition.
Política para que esta
And of course,
situación
there needs to be political will in order for it to work.
desafíos en estos temas de
Luis,
diseño
let's hear your challenges.
Muy bien, muchas gracias. Sí,
Thank you
nosotros
very much.
coincidimos con los colegas anteriores en
I think we agree with our colleagues in that part.
de manera que puedan ser digeribles para
The idea is to make the ideas
pueda tener toda esa información.
easy to digest so that the system can have all the information. Something important that was mentioned is that as government entities, we had a challenge of a lack of resources. That was our first challenge, because as Scarlett said, the strengthening of the information system, information technology system, but also the team, because it's not just systems, we're talking about human resources, we're talking about equipment for the different offices. That has been one of the great challenges. But as INAP, we are very thankful of a corporation that has believed in us, has believed in this type of traceability system. And so we have received that cooperation in terms of development as well. And we continue having that because Guatemala is still developing and improving the things that we have, seeing which other things we have to improve. And so that's a first challenge that we were able to solve with cooperation. The second is resistance to change. That really has been one of the main things. As it was said before, the users were used to using their own documents, but now we are centralizing everything in one single document, which will be distributed as a scheme for example, with a banking system, checks that would be delivered to each one and they would register their movements. So that's the way that we're working. But for example, we have to see which were the companies that were doing it. There's for the legal forestry industry, it was great. It was really an innovation because they didn't have to fill out all these books by just filling out the information in the system. They were informing of their documents, and so they didn't have to do double work. But for people who were not, companies that were not doing things right, this was, of course, not good for them because there was a certain control and they weren't able to continue to do this, what we call wood laundering. They weren't able to duplicate documents and things of the sort. These things that all of the forestry industries in our countries have trouble with. There's always the aim, also there's always companies that try, of course, to evade this type of control. Remember that in all our countries, we have a sector of the communities. Communities are not well informed many times. There's a lot of disinformation in the countries. And they were saying that the product would not be able to be sold anymore because the state institution was setting barriers and obstacles. So much so that one time they came and had a strike here saying that they were going to burn. I don't know if you heard the news about that, but here in Guatemala, there's that kind of thing when there's a conflict and they said, okay, we're going to burn you with all this, but there had to be a lot of work, socialization to see that what the system was doing was really make the access to trade easier, and that it was not something that was bad for them. So that was very important in implementation, especially to be able to involve these communities in the design of the traceability system so that they felt part of it.
No, gracias. Gracias a ti, Luis. Excelente. Bueno, ya vamos teniendo una idea clara, bueno, de lo que han sido los logros, de lo que son los desafíos, y falta la pregunta obligada, ¿verdad? Que es, hablemos un poco de vacíos, ¿verdad? Y qué falta por hacer. Entonces también, por tiempo, yo sé que aquí, si no les pongo un número, creo que podemos hacer una lista también bastante grande. ¿Qué les parece si hablamos de 2 o 3 vacíos o cosas que faltan por hacer para que el sistema funcione a como fue planificado? Ahora me corresponde darle la palabra a Luis de primero y Edgar de segundo, y dejamos a Scarlett de finalista en esta tercera fase. Adelante, Luis.
Muchas gracias. Muy bien, dentro de los principales vacíos, si estamos hablando cuando se inició con el sistema de trazabilidad que nosotros conocemos como CEINEF, que es el que ha hecho mucho ruido en toda América Latina, empezamos con la parte de lo que era el control de todo lo que ingresaba en las industrias forestales, o depósitos forestales, para la transformación, la importación y la exportación. Sin embargo, lo que teníamos nosotros con un gran vacío era tener el control, porque no teníamos esta parte de trazabilidad de lo que salía del bosque. Ahora, este es uno de los grandes desafíos que tenemos en estos momentos, aunque les quiero comentar que ya comenzamos desde el año pasado, ¿verdad?, a implementarlo, porque ya tenemos nosotros ahora ya trazabilidad desde el bosque, pero estamos en la parte de coníferas, estamos llegando a la parte de latifoliadas también. Pero a lo que yo quiero hablar es en la parte de todo lo que es el aprovechamiento. El aprovechamiento en el cambio de uso de la tierra, que este año estamos llenando ese vacío. Consumos familiares, ¿verdad?, de que son de uso doméstico, los exentos de licencia que viene aunado al registro de las plantaciones voluntarias. Todo este tipo porque el sector forestal es bastante amplio, ¿verdad? Y tiene muchas otras formas de las cuales tenemos que ir cerrando todo esto, porque, por ejemplo, por dar un ejemplo, el consumo familiar no puede ser comercializado, sino que únicamente es de uso doméstico. Sin embargo, el vacío era de que estaba llegando a las industrias, entonces no se estaba utilizando este aprovechamiento como tal. Pero esto lo estamos cerrando en la implementación de otros sistemas, ¿verdad?, a través de venir y facilitar, en este caso, la gestión para cada una de estos servicios, ¿verdad?, que la población guatemalteca nos está requiriendo. Entonces, tenemos esto, ya estamos trabajando y hemos empezado a implementar. Por ejemplo, en el caso de exentos, ya se comenzó este año, por ejemplo, de las licencias forestales el año pasado, ¿verdad? Ya tenemos una experiencia de más o menos más de un año.
We have been working for over a year with a system of permits. Now we are not in baby steps anymore, but during this year, we are working with the next implementation, so we will be able to close the gap, because we were having some gaps in the whole value chain from the harvesting point to the export. Now we're trying to close this, and this is all related to the implementation of this new traceability system. We're not seeing the challenge of granting permits anymore, which was the issue we mentioned at the beginning. In our case, when we talk about gaps or things that we still need to do, right now, we are conducting the development of the digital module that has to do with land use and utilization. And this has to do with how they have to fill out administrative forms so they can receive their grants and permits, so they can start producing and harvesting in the land. So we still need to implement this module. And also the module for planning, which is a previous stage for the utilization one. This is a module that has a huge geographical component. So it is important to say that we still need to receive funding for the development of this stage. Generally speaking, as a traceability system for forestry, we say we recognize and detect, and a huge opportunity for us to continue working and improving has to do with the fact that we need to make sure that the different modules for traceability communicate among ourselves, or as we said in the IT world, to be interoperational one. In Colombia, we just launched the industrial module. We have a very nice example of interoperability with other sectors, that is the agricultural sector, that is very important in the country, in which we have a lot of trading activities. So through the interaction of these modules and the communication of these modules, we are seeing a nice example of communication of two different industries, what comes from the forestry harvesting and what comes from natural forests. So this is a very nice opportunity, very interesting one. And I remember in previous meeting, we also talked at regional level. It is nice, it would be nice to see in the future how traceability system for forestry activities in the region, they will be able to exchange information and communicate among themselves. So this is a room for opportunity. It is on the table, and we are seeing examples at early stages, but it will be a great opportunity for us to continue working towards this end among the countries in the region, so we can exchange information, all the information being generated, as Tobias already highlighted, and also the colleague from Honduras. It's so important to exchange all the information being generated through these traceability systems. So I will leave it.
Super,
thank you. That would be all.
Scarlett.
Thank you. And what about you, Scarlett? If you can share with us, what are the gaps or the rooms for improvement, the things that you still think that should be done in order to have a more functional system in place? Generally speaking, I think that we have a huge gap, not only in Honduras, and this has to do with the statistic culture for forestry statistics when it comes to figures. So this is very important. As you know, we are all hearing about climate change. This platform will also help for the development of handling data and how they have to be entered into the platform. This could be revealing how the situation is currently at the national level, what things can be done, what actions can be taken in order to improve these challenges. So I think that this is something where we need to continue making progress at a national level in the data management. So the management of data in this platform will be key in order to strengthen the situation, the forestry situation in our country. So the management of this platform will also enable us, in many cases, things that have to do with forestry issues that we had in the past. So this is a gap in which we still need to continue working and to strengthen cooperation opportunities. So I would like to mention as well that Honduras in 2021, in February last year, we were signatories of a voluntary agreement, that is CELAVA, as a country exporting timber to the European Union. So this also would help in order to close this gap for the use of timber in a more legal way. So this will also strengthen the system of the CIRMA system that we have in place. So this can be implemented in a better way, because of course we always see issues in this sense with the legality of the timber. We always see data shedding light on situations that we would like not to have, but we have, unfortunately, regarding illegal activities, illegal timber activities. So this is a way for us to close this gap.
Perdón, tenía el micrófono cerrado.
I'm sorry, my mic was mute.
El ciclo de preguntas que tenemos.
Thank you. That would be the end for our panels for questions. Now, we will go for the questions from the audience.
¿Qué preguntas les podemos hacer?
So we can see what questions we can ask you. We have some of these questions.
Las siguientes preguntas, yo quisiera
I would like to,
que en este caso la puedan responder.
in this case, if you can voluntarily ask, so I will not ask you one by one. So any of you who may want to answer these questions from the audience can go ahead and volunteer. We're doing good with time. So we are lucky because as moderator, sometimes I am disaster managing time, but today we're doing great with time. So thank you for that. First question we have is, what are the characteristics, the minimum characteristics should the systems have for independent accountability in order to systemize the information and the access to users, and to systemize the information that users load into our traceability system? What will be the minimum characteristics for the accounting system? Just repeating the question now.
¿Quién le gustaría
Who would like to answer this, please?
A esta pregunta? Tal vez le voy a dar la palabra a Luis, porque Luis... ¿Quién iba? Edgar. Adelante, Edgar.
Edgar, go ahead. Thank you.
Bueno, pues creo que un sistema de trazabilidad.
I think that a traceability system must have, they're asking about characteristics or features, right? So first of all, I think that it must have a clear purpose. What do I want to have? What is the main goal of having a traceability system? So for all of us, we were already talking about a common one as a regional approach, or a regional goal is to make sure that we have legality in these activities. Then it also has to be aligned with the policies and the regulatory system of the country. I should be creating a traceability system that is coherent with the policies in place in each one of the countries. As a third characteristic, I would say that it has to be easily understood and it should be easy to use. So because the forestry stakeholders, as you know, we have different education levels and cultural levels as well. So it's very important to take this into account when designing a system or a traceability system. When you do it through IT platforms, they have to be user-friendly. You have to make sure that you keep them close, and because not everybody has the same educational level when it comes to IT tools. So making this user-friendly, of course, will be better for everybody, because then you avoid resistance to change, because everybody would say, okay, I am more comfortable with writing this in paper. Not everybody has access to computers yet. So these are the things that should be also taken into consideration, basic ones, when it comes to developing a traceability system, or how to design it or implement it, of course. Thank you.
Excelente, Edgar. Me parece que...
Excellent answer. Thank you, Edgar. Yes, I think that this is one of the biggest challenges that the traceability has, especially ensuring transparency and also the interrelation and the independence of users. What do I mean by this? How you can keep integrity of the database when you have information entering from users that are granting or requesting grants or permits, or the clerks or officials that are going to be doing or conducting the forestry controls, right? So how can we integrate all this feedback, all these inputs, and how the different users and interest in the institutional operation, how you can integrate all this within the system, making sure that you also keep independence without corrupting the database according to or generating lack of information or conflicting information. This is a huge challenge. What do you think about this?
Edgar, no sé si estás ahí
Edgar?
todavía.
I don't know if you're there. Yes. The last thing that you said, what was it?
Sí, no, el comentario que hacía tu respuesta es
What I was saying was
que hay
the challenge that there is for the traceability system to be able to allow action independence of the different
para ingresar información.
Users. Some of them will use it to include document information for the permits,
Hay otros que van a ocupar el sistema para
transport
control.
and transformation. Others will use it for control. Others will use it
Luis también
for
como
auditing,
sistema de información para toma de
also
decisiones.
as an information system to make decisions, and others for forestry monitoring or different type of internal controls.
Me parece que ese viene siendo un
I
gran
think
desafío
that
para
has been a great challenge
a estos diferentes
for the
intereses
system to be open to these different interests,
no corrompen una base de datos, ¿verdad?
and how the
Uno de los
members,
grandes
the
temas.
staff can
No
use
sé qué
it.
piensas.
Sí, 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 y lo es, Guillermo.
I don't know
Lo
what
es.
you think. Yes, it is a really important topic when implementing. We call the different modules that responded to the whole chain. So the leveraging, the transformation of products in the industry level. And so there's the differences and the uses, strengthening the technical teams that, as you said, in Colombia are decentralized in topics of forestry administration, management, and the subdivision of the technical team to see who is going to be the technician that is going to make the follow-up and the registration of the different forestry assets, also the mobilization in the industry, and for the system to be good for this and to be in relation with the technical language and with the intervention of the different main stakeholders that is the general citizenship that wants to have access to the resource, the ones who are taking the vehicles with the products from one place to another in the country or to a harbor to be exported. And so there's the document that we have in Colombia for mobilization, or the user in the industry that transforms those products. So
Hacia la pregunta de qué hay que tener en cuenta
the
para
system, so what do we have to take into account for that information system? The language has to be good for all of these different stakeholders. It has to be understandable for these technical users, but also for the citizenship who wants to know where the product that they want to take home is coming from. That's sort of the conclusion that I would say on how to reach that level of language that is good and clear to be able to guarantee traceability with the objective of legality that we share regionally, but also makes the implementation efficient and effective in terms of all what we were talking about, this resistance to change from the technical users to the final users of these models.
No sé si
Thank you,
Luis
Edgar. Excellent. I don't know if Luis or Scarlett want to talk about those minimal characteristics that a system should have
la información de que los usuarios
that
ingresan
allows
en el
the
sistema de trazabilidad.
systematization of the information for the users.
De mi parte, también agregando, creo que
So I would like to add that, as was very well explained by Edgar, something very important is that when developing a system or designing a system, there have to be different roles and profiles that allow it for it to be versatile And something important is that many times, and we've seen that in the institution, many times there are manual processes. And so it is thought that when creating a digital system, an informatic system, is going to be better, and that's fine. But many times they just take the manual processes and put it in the system, and it's the same bureaucracy. So what we have to do is a redesign of the processes. The information technology system has to be a tool to make it easier. What we say internally, and we've talked about it with the administration, the authorities, is that we didn't have to bureaucratize the systems, because we are taking the same bureaucracy of the manual process to this other system, and it's taking the same time. So we have to use technology as a good tool, but the processes have to be simpler. What we are looking for as an institution is to try to make things easy so that the final user can say, wow, it's so easy to make things legally. If we put a lot of procedures that make it a lot of really bureaucratic, then we are pushing towards illegality as an institution. So we're trying to make a really friendly system that really goes towards the user, for them to be really trust it and say it's really easy to do this.
Yo solo mencionar.
I just wanted to mention.
Eso que acaba de decir Luis es yo creo que una
sorry,
píldora de
Scarlett, but what
sabiduría.
Luis just say, I think, is really
A veces
is real wisdom for us all, because sometimes
a veces lo
there's
vemos
this
como algo
phobia with computers, and we see them as something infallible, but the traceability system has to be designed
sea la dueña de los procesos, sea el
with the administration being the owner of the processes, and it doesn't have to be a slave of the system. So it's very important. It's almost philosophical.
Cómo llevar a cabo y cómo
How
manejar un
to
sistema
carry out, how to manage
que la
a
tecnología
traceability system and not have technology eat us up,
eso que
and
dijiste,
it
Luis,
ending with us being the slaves of the system. So I want to back up
Scarlett,
that
adelante.
and
¿Quieres,
also highlight that. I think it's important.
Bienvenido.
So Scarlett,
Solo mencionar que
I just wanted to mention
informáticamente robusto.
that it has to be a robust system, and it has to be adaptable. It has to change. There's going to be information every year, every day, and the platform has to change in order to be modified or restructured. Yes, excellent.
Con lo que acabas de decir,
I really agree with what you've just said, Scarlett, because I think that
tiene que ver mucho
that
también
has to
con el
do with the order and protocol that we have to hire the companies that create the software. We have to try, especially when we are in the forestry administration of the state.
Scarlett
And
anteriormente,
going back to what Scarlett said before, when there's a change of staff,
los ciclos del personal
many times the cycles of the staff in the forestry administration of the state, they are very short, and there's a lot of change in the personnel. So it's very important for the companies that create the software to be able to be reminded that they have to provide a dossier with a code, with the manuals, with all the information in order to have this maintenance and to continue to develop it in the future with new staff and eventually with new companies. So we need to go back to the source codes in order to be able to be in control of this. Let's go to the next question. Here I have a question for Tobias. Tobias, the question says, which countries have
en el bosque según lo que indican los documentos oficiales?
Thank you. Thank you for this question. I assume this refers to pre and post-harvest verification of management plans and so on. Of course, as we said, monitoring and verification
internet was off for a second.
Are very important. We would also like to know, looking at the systems, how and to which extent they are carried out. However, I have to say that I think the system developers and the systems so far have been focusing on systematizing and standardizing the information that is reported to the system by the private sector users, whereas the information on monitoring and verification activity is not yet standardized and captured to the extent as is the private sector information. And if you remember the graph we saw, it is like a layer that is more or less integrated in the system, but in most cases, it stands a little bit outside the system yet. So it is really difficult to tell to which extent the monitoring and verification activities are carried out at the level as the regulation usually requires it. An interesting example in that discussion is maybe Peru, where, as probably some of you know, the pre and the post-harvest inspections are assigned to different authorities. And we could learn from several studies that those institutions also came to quite different results in carrying out these activities. So the institutionalization and the integration of monitoring verification is very important for those systems, especially if one objective of the system is to build trust in the authority, as has been mentioned also before by one of the colleagues. So, and I think there is some opportunity for improvement in better integration and better standardization on the information of the verification activity as part of the systems. Maybe in the plantation sector of Guatemala, Luis can comment. I think you started to work also on systematic remote sensing verification of the state of different areas. I don't know. Thank you. So far my answer on that question.
Gracias, Tobias. Sí, precisamente.
Thank you, Tobias. Yes, I don't know if Luis wants to talk a bit about this topic.
¿Cómo se realiza la verificación de la madera?
How verification of timber is done in the forest. When we think about what's the objective of a traceability system, it's because we think that the wood that is being worked on during the whole value chain has a legal origin. And this legal origin, when it comes from natural forests, we want to make sure, we want to have guarantees that the integrity, the ecological integrity of a forest is being respected, and that there is an aim to try to have less impact on the environment. So we would like to have a module to have this verification on a geographical level and to be able to do it a long time. It's traceability through time when it's about the forest. Tobias was saying that Guatemala could be a good case study. I don't know if Luis wants to talk about this. Yes, of course. As I was saying before, we are working and we've already have a year of the implementation of this, of the traceability system. So that has already been automatized for the forest, the industry, everything that is taken from the forest.
So when we are assessing different forms or different approaches to do our work, we have already conducted our initial stage. The pandemic helped us in a way because we have to fasten all processes. When you are in the lockdown, you cannot control properly because the forestry is not able to work from home, right? This is a sector that works in the field. So we have to continue conducting verification in the field. And in Guatemala, here, everybody was locked down. So the whole country was locked down. So this made our task more difficult. So what we did back then from the WRI, we receive a lot of their support. So we are really thankful for that. We help us conduct verification through satellite mapping. And we are doing these activities. We are continuing to use this in order to see how coverage can be done so we can be more efficient. Since we have on this pandemic, which is unfortunately still ongoing, we have to use the satellite technology so we can monitor these activities. So we were able to reduce this verification, the time and the amount of work that it took, because we are able to use these technologies. Since we are not able to go to the offices, even though we haven't stopped working, of course, we are also using other IT platforms so we can gather different ways of communications and for these controls and surveillance and inspections to be conducted properly, especially when we come to forestry input, because we have inputs that are for protection. And we also have products that are for production, which are going to be traded in the end. So we already come with some experience, and we're going to continue to extend this experience through the monitoring of the different kinds of use to make sure that the permits that we granted, since they are conducting moderate logging, they will be continuing to fulfill the requirements of the grants and the permits initially granted. So we are going to continue providing surveillance on that. Thank you for that. So as you know, these are the questions that we are receiving from the public. Now we would like to ask the panelists to ask them a question, but we're going to be fusing two questions that are interrelated, which have to do with what is the first investment that each country should do in order for the forestry resource to have a traceability system available in the shortest possible time. And this has to do, of course, with the challenges that we mentioned about the political will or the political mandate, and how soon were these decrees on different resolutions published so this traceability system could be applied in the shortest and fastest way. So I wanted to open now for Scarlett, Luis, and Edgar, so you can answer these or share with us about your experience on what is the role of the political will and how, and also from the administrative processes when it comes to the publication of decrees or adjusting the processes at an institutional level for a traceability system to be implemented as fast as possible. Thank you. Who would like to start?
Scarlett, adelante.
Scarlett? Yes, here in Honduras, when it comes to the political will, we have seen improvement in this sense. As you all know, last year we had re-elections in Honduras. We saw a higher degree of interest in a better handling and management of the forestry resources and protecting these resources as well. So we saw a very important change in the mindset of this new government. They have taken more measures in order to protect our forests. And what was the other question that you connected? Because I was having some problems with my audio. Yes, when it comes to political will, you answer that. And also, what are the mechanisms that will help for a traceability system to be implemented in the short term or as fast as possible when it comes to publishing decrees or procedures that must be issued for this system to be in place and to be operational in an official way? Okay, thank you. This year, we have been conducting a restructuring of the Sigma platform so we can conduct a better follow-up and tracking system for timber. So we have changed the way that we manage this information. We work hand in hand with the IT department so we can have a more robust platform. And in this case, this good political will has been very important with the change of government. So I would say that even though this is not an official platform yet, because it belongs to the sector, I think that creating a decree based on the forestry law, this is a very important mechanism, so you can standardize the process 100%. Excellent, Scarlett. Thank you for your answer, Edgar. In the case of Colombia, I would say that we have a very amicable political will when it comes to traceability system. Since 2018, we saw that we had an increase in interest through the development of sustainable activities that are related to this green growth, as it is called here. So we were already implementing some traceability systems. Also, back in 2020, we had another national policy instrument through a 2041 decree for forestry activities. It also establishes lines of policies that reinforce measures against deforestation, which is a very complex thing in Colombia. So in order to fight this or combat this, they were already establishing back in 2020 that this should be done through these greener agreements. So they were already put in place. So by the fact that they were recognizing these political decrees, these were important allies and they also contribute in the cooperation. Since we have these lines of policies, we also were able to request financial resources to start designing and developing and also implementing this traceability system for timber in Colombia. So regarding the other question that has to do with what would be the first thing that a country should implement to make sure that we have a traceability system or they have a traceability system, the first investment, I would say that the first investment beyond the economical part that of course is necessary is to generate this environment from the political standpoint for the traceability system. So you can start to land from the policy to the regulations and the investment so you can develop on these systems. And also you have to have a very important strengthening of the social capital from the entities that are responsible for the management of the forestry resources in things that have to do with training and education. This, of course, goes hand in hand with technical training as well. And also to educate the users of the forests or those who have access to the services or the different services related to forests in Colombia. I would say that this would be the first or initial investment in understanding what you have, what is the resource that you have available, and how it can be used in a best way, and how the traceability system is a tool that will help you towards this end. That's what traceabilities are, right? A tool in order to help administration managing the resources from the institutional standpoint, and also for the point of view of the users, because they will also help in the best possible use, meeting the general goal of having a benefit from the forestry resource, which translates basically into a benefit that is also an economical benefit. How can I make a living out of what the forest gives me, right? I have to report my activities, how I am conducting my activities. The system I have to have a proper system to conduct follow-up on my activities. So this is very important because, as I heard from other colleagues from IAP, which is something that we are also doing here, is that through the traceability system, this is a way for us to have information about the sector, But this is also a booster for economical growth. This is a way for us to show what we have, what you are obtaining in terms of forestry products, which also ensures through the system that these are legal activities and this is how they have a potential for being traded, and how you can also show this as a responsible stakeholder because you are conducting or doing a sustainable use of your forest, and this is ensured through traceability systems. So just to round up, this wouldn't be a first investment. You have to do many things. There are many pillars that must be taken into account in order to make these traceability systems a reality. In Colombia, the main goal is to promote the economy of the forestry sector. And this was included and this was drafted in the different decrees and the laws that we have in place that now we are seeing more and more results in the country. And yesterday, in fact, we met the new president in this country. So these are part of the agenda of the different ministries and the different stakeholders, how we can provide a continuity in the new government program through the milestones that we were already achieving for traceability and timber. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Edgar. Excelente.
Thank you,
Respuesta.
Edgar. Excellent response.
Vamos a cerrar esta
I
sesión.
think that it is time for us to close this session for Q&As. We're sorry that we still have some questions pending.
Este proceso, pues quisiera simplemente resaltar que
I would like to highlight the fact that we have had a very nice presentation of the manual, followed by a very interesting discussion of a panel with officials and clerks from the state, from Colombia, Guatemala, and Honduras, where we have also discussed which were the achievements, the challenges, and especially the gaps that we still need to close, the things that we still need to do. We also receive questions regarding the challenges on how to control timber activities in our forests, on how to generate accountability in an independent way from the different users for these traceability systems. And we have also discussed about the strategies to have in place in order to implement these traceability systems in the shortest possible way. So I hope that for everybody participating here today or hearing this, I hope that you found this discussion useful and fruitful. We would invite you to revise the document where you will be able to see further opportunities and further experiences from other countries, from Brazil as well, Panama. And it would be very interesting for you to see how these other countries were able to have different challenges. They were also successful in different things, and they still need to work in other gaps that they need to close. This will enable us to continue growing in these concepts that we are developing jointly in order to continue working for traceability systems. Now, Naidu, I will give you the floor so you can close the event, and thank you, everybody. Have a nice rest of the day. Thank you, Guillermo. Thank you, all our panelists. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It was a pleasure for us to see many people connecting from Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, Honduras, and Guatemala. With all your input on your nice messages that you have sent us through the WhatsApp and through the chat. This has been a work. This is a work that belongs to everybody. We will also like to leave a message with you. That is that these processes, as Scarlett said, these are tools for us to continue to improve. This is a continuous improvement tool. This is not the end of anything. In many cases, it's the beginning and the opportunity for others. So these traceability tool at a national level, as we said, in Colombia, in Guatemala, and of course in the rest of the countries, in Honduras, and the rest countries participated in the report, and this is not restrictive for the rest of the countries in Latin America. This is a tool for both the private and the public sector in order to improve the management of our forests and to make the accountability and the recollection of data easier. So thank you everybody for participating. Just to remind you all, this session has been recorded and will be available in the FAO's channel in YouTube for anyone who would like to listen to this again or share it. Thank you so much. Nice rest of the day.